also start the recording of this PhUSE meeting. We are a couple of people in this group that have been having discussions on and off for some time now, talking about representing the CDISC protocol in RDF. We are a couple of people that's been talking about it. Usually we have Jeff Lowe from Medidata and Frederick Malphite from his own consultant company. I think these are the people I think everyone around the table have met and talked with. One topic we've been talking quite a lot about is the eligibility criteria, part of the protocol. I'm very happy that we have David and Christelle from the EHR for Clinical Research project, which I also is part of from the FPS side. And I know that there are several people that can't join us today that are really interested in all of this, and that's the reason why I'm doing a recording of this. Okay, that has a short background, and let's jump into the good work that you've been doing here. So, Christelle, will you start talking and ping me when you want to move on the slides?
Okay, just as an introduction, so these slides have been prepared by the two partners, three, including Custodix, so some partners of the EHR4CR project, and mainly Manuel Newcomb from X Clinical. They are experts in CDISC format, CDISC SDM and ODM, and the INSERM lab. We are providing the semantic interoperability services within the platform developed by Custodix, and David Wutz from Custodix is online. I'm not sure that we are in the middle of the concern of this working group. We, as the provider of the semantic interoperability services, all our, let's say, semantic resources are in a repository, and we can export them as RDF, and we are working on representing the majority of them based on SCOs. That's something I can say for the semantic resource repository that we are developing for the platform. That's the part that is linked to RDF. Coming to the CDISC issue, we are trying, in fact, to provide some semantic annotation of some CDISC file based on this semantic repository, based on this repository of data element that we define, but we have not really worked on the RDF representation of the CDISC content. I don't know if what I'm saying is clear. We will go through the slides to make it clearer. So. In fact, basically, if you go, so the slide 2 is the agenda. So there are a few slides about CDISC SDM-ODM provided by X Clinical, and then we explain how we propose to represent the eligibility criteria based on the data element that we defined in the project. So to represent the free text eligibility criteria that are embedded in the CDISC SDM files, we intend to formalize them based on the data element of the project. So it will be the first part of this presentation, and the second part of the presentation is dedicated to the semantic annotation that we intend to set up in order to link the data item in CDISC ODM to our data elements. So if you go to slide 3, xClinical, who is our CDISC expert, is working with the classical representation in XML of the CDISC standard. So we worked on that basis. If you go slide 4, so we have worked with xClinical. Basically, the idea in this slide represents the 3 entry points in the life cycle of a clinical trial where the EHR4CR platform can be used in order to reuse data in electronic healthcare record to support the execution of the clinical trial. So in fact you have, we will start with the use case 1 and 2. So basically the use case 1 is related to feasibility study. So the idea is to identify in clinical data warehouse in hospital number of eligible patients, and the use case 2 is to support the recruitment process in the different hospitals. And basically for these 2 use cases the question is quite similar. The idea is from free text eligibility criteria to transform this free text in a formal representation and in a formal query that can be transformed and executed on heterogeneous clinical data warehouse. So basically the only difference between the 2 is that when you perform a feasibility study, usually you don't have yet some CDISC format of your trial because the trial does not exist. So I suggest that we will focus on use case 2. When you are at the stage of use case 2, patient recruitment, your trial, the clinical trial exists, and hopefully there is a CDISC format describing some part of the clinical trial, and in fact that include in the SDM part the representation of the inclusion-exclusion criteria. So if you go to slide 5, in fact Manuel from xClinical provided the structure of the ODM with the CDISC ODM enriched with the SDM part, and in the SDM metadata you can find in such file the list of inclusion-exclusion criteria, and these criteria are available in free text. So slide 6. So the idea is that we can identify each eligibility criteria, and that they can be used as a standalone definition. And then, in fact, we use the idea is that we use this CDISC file so that we can start the process of using the query builder of the platform in order to formalize this free text eligibility criteria. So if you go slide 7, what was explained by xClinical is that in the SDM part you can find the information about the criteria. Each criterion has an ID, and what could be interesting is that in addition each criterion could be linked to a condition, and the condition is used in ODM. So we try to see with X-Clinical how far we could express in the CDISC file a formal representation and stored a formal representation of the free text eligibility criteria within the CDISC file. So that's something we are working on, but that's not the heart of what we have, what has been experimented in EHR4CR. So in the slide 8, you can see that for each condition that could be associated to the each criterion, we could store in the ODM as a formal expression context the query that we create with the EHR4CR query builder. It means that we could include in the CDISC file the translation of each free text eligibility criteria into our formal representation. And if you go slide 9, that's the query builder of the project. When we got for each free text eligibility, we use this tool to represent the free text, the eligibility criteria, combining some standard data elements with Boolean operator and temporal constraints. So the idea is that we take in the left of the screen, the copy screen, you can see you can see the data, the hierarchy of the different data element that we manage in the data element repository, and then you can drag and drop this data element. They can be observations, they can be procedure, they can be substance administration, they can be also information about the demographic of the patient, and so on. So you can drag and drop this data element, and you combine them in the query builder, and you can see on the right of the copy screen the combination of the different data elements. And then slide 10, you provide a query which is standardized, and it is a pseudocode. It's not a standard language. It is a language that has been developed for the project named Eclectic. It could be another formal representation, but the idea of this one is that it is human readable, and you can within the expression you can recognize the standard code of the data elements, because our data elements are defined. They are templates or archetype, and they are defined based on reference terminologies like LOINC, ATC, SNOMED. So here, after using the query builder, you get a formal expression of the eligibility criteria. And in fact, we could store this expression in the ODM part as the translation as the formalization of each eligibility criteria. So basically, that's the way we introduce, in fact, the process of the formalization of the eligibility criteria and semantic annotation of this free text eligibility criteria into CDISC file. I don't know if you want to have a discussion at that point on this SDM part and the patient recruitment process, or do you want mainly based on eligibility criteria, or do you want that I go directly to the second part that address the semantic annotation of the data item of the ECRF itself? What is your suggestion?
My suggestion is, Christelle, that we open up the floor for questions around the eligibility criteria, which is our main focus, and then we, after that, take a look at the CRF part of it. So, Ron, Sarah, Scott, questions and thinking from what you've seen so far?
Hi, Kirsten, it's Ron. One question I guess I have is I wonder what percentage of eligibility criteria the current system can handle. So say if you look at all of the criteria in CC.gov and you just look at, an entire collection of inclusion and exclusion, how representative, how expressive is this, and what percentage can it handle? And I guess the question maybe two parts. Whether one would be the actual number that actually were looked at, and the other one is the potential.
Okay, so in terms of expressivity within the EHR4CR project, we evaluated the development done for each use case on a set of clinical trials, and in total for the 3 use cases, we worked on around 50 clinical trials that were not dedicated to one domain. We have clinical trials in the cancer domain, cardiovascular, diabetes, and so on. In fact, the eligibility criteria have been for each clinical trial. The eligibility criteria have been pre-processed by our SPA partners. So the aim was definitively not to cover all the eligibility criteria, but a subset of them that makes sense in the scope of feasibility study or patient recruitment. So our scope was not 100% of the eligibility criteria because it does not make sense. It is the opinion of the FPA partner. It does not make sense to compute all of them. Only some of them are useful for each situation, feasibility study and patient recruitment. And we don't have, it's something that we are currently evaluated, but from the pre-processed eligibility criteria, the coverage of the data elements and the expressivity of the query builder, since we have this Boolean, we have a nice solution for the temporal constraint. It was, of course, it is an issue to cover everything, but the result were quite acceptable. But I think that Kirsten could much more comment on that because she was part of the evaluator and followed also this aspect. We don't have yet. We are working on evaluating, to give numbers of the rate of what we covered and the issue that we had. We have for sure issues for the medication part. We only address the type of the medication. We do not have yet the representation of the quantity, so of the dose, and we don't use also the administrative the route. So we know that we have limitation for the representation of the medication.
Yeah, Kerstin here.
Yep. Yeah, sorry, maybe I can comment on that as well, we are next to the work we're doing in EHR4CR, we also there's also a champion program in place engaging FPI partners and hospitals outside consortium to do some pilots with using a dedicated instance of the platform. And in those pilots, we're also looking at formalizing existing protocols. And even though so it's not the intention to model the free text criteria to the exact conditions stated, because most of them have to be checked in screening and so forth. But we can already see that for the protocols we're looking at, we have already nice coverages of over 50% of the criteria and potential up to 80. And we also at the same time, because we realize there are some limitations in the scope in EHR4CR, we're also working on extending the capabilities of the model. For instance, the route, dosage, and so forth for medication that Christelle was referring to is also something that we are building into the query formalization that we're using. We're both extending on the EHR4CR work, but we're also using another formalized representation, which is brought in from another project called Eureka, which is called SNACL, and it's very similar, but it has different features as compared to the eclectic language you just saw, and so they're in some aspects the one is better, in other aspects the other one is better, but we depending on the context we can use both of them. And we are in the process of extending the query model, the formalized criteria model, to allow covering more specific queries, for instance, the medication frequency and dosage and route and so forth.
Just to comment on David's comment, for the repository of the resource, we have a very flexible tool, and it's not difficult to extend the expressiveness of the template that we have. So for the EHR4CR project, for the version 1, we focused on very simple template for observation, procedure, substance administration, and so on. And we are now working on, as David was mentioning, on extending the scope of these different templates, and we are closely looking at FHIR, that gives a nice scope of the of what we should represent from clinical findings, since the FHIR model takes the power of HL7v3, but simplifies the representation and is much more semantic web oriented. So that's the direction in which we'll go to enhance the representativity, the expressiveness of the queries on the regarding the data elements.
Shashini, I think great input, and I think from a pharma company perspective, you mentioned the champion program, David, and the tests we've been using this tool, and I think it's important that we have the approach we take here is not really to mine existing text strings of eligibility criteria. It's really, as you saw on the previous slide here, is really building with almost like Lego blocks. So you take a Lego block in terms of what we call a data element, you drop it here, you define your criteria for it. So back to your question, Ron, it's not really comparing as something you try to mine and say how well you manage to capture the content. It's an approach where you really build up something, and the broader context here is to query electronic healthcare records, or rather the clinical data warehouse at hospitals to for feasibility of the study, and in the next step to do the recruitment, which is slightly different context.
Yeah, I understood that. The reason I asked, of course, was since we are interested in modeling eligibility criteria in general.
Yep.
Without even not looking at the mining aspect, obviously, if something is used in a clinical trial and we can't model it, then obviously there's a gap. But I understand the scope here. Thank you. I appreciate the answer.
Okay. Any other questions from you, Ron, or Scott or Sarah?
I guess I have a question on the language that you created, the electric language. Under the hood, I think that you're probably translating that into some other language. Are you using Python or something else?
No, in fact, the transformation, there is two transformations done, because you see the eclectic is a pseudocode. So it's used to represent the central queries, but when the queries are distributed on the different hospital sites, and coming at the hospital site, there is two types of transformation. There is a transformation in terms of structure. Basically, we have two kinds of clinical data warehouse, and they are relational databases, so it is transformed into SQL. So we have a transformation of these templates into SQL statements that can be executed in the two types of clinical data warehouse that we have. And in parallel, there is the transcoding, there is the transformation of this central code into local codes, because all the hospitals are not using SNOMED or even Glowink. So sometimes they have to transcode the information. So, and one of the clinical data warehouse that we have, one type of the clinical data warehouse that we have is I2B2. You perhaps know this open source solution that is really used in many university hospitals in US and in Europe. So it makes the platform quite easy to plug to any clinical data warehouse of that type in a new hospital. So because the templates that are used by Eclectic for the central queries have been already translated into SQL that could be executed on I2B2 instances.
Okay. And then the language that you're using to parse the clinical trials itself then is separate, and what technology are you using to do that?
To pass the free text eligibility criteria?
Yes.
It's not a technology. It's knowing the free text eligibility criteria. It is manually done, as Kirsten mentioned. It's manually done using the EHR4CR query builder. You consider your free text expression, and then you have to translate this free text expression using the query builder, selecting in the data elements the building blocks that you need to get to express your eligibility criteria. And until now, there is no support to do that using NLP solution. Some projects have this kind of support in their pipeline, like Ergo and other projects. Until now, there is no such support. You have to do it manually using the query builder.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. You mentioned, David, I think the Eureka project, which is another EU project, quite close in scope to this. And they use another formalization, as you talked about, but is it kind of looking similar, or is it on another? Is it more machine close, or just to give a flavor of it? And what's the name of it?
Well, actually, I can show a couple of slides showing what it looks like.
Yeah.
That's okay. Or otherwise, I can just tell you. The semantic approach of the Eureka project is slightly different, but the formalization is rather similar. But from a technology perspective, there is quite some differences as well. In EHR4CR, we're working with a statically defined, strongly typed query model, being the called blue model, for which you have the eclectic human readable counterpart. And so that's a model that is statically scoped, meaning that if you want to introduce new concepts or new relationships, you basically have to add them to the code. It's a Java-based technology. You have to add it, and then you can add the support. The approach in Eureka is using dynamic type languages. We're using the features of the Groovy language, which runs on the Java virtual machine. And the nice thing about that is, because it's a dynamically typed language, is that you can add support for new constructs without needing to recompile everything. Meaning that if you, for instance, if I have an observation and I want to add the feature target sites, stating on which site in the body the observation applies, then I can dynamically add that by extending the query execution environment, which is just a Groovy runtime. So it's technologically speaking, the approach is kind of different, but of course in the end, both are languages that are formalized, so they're computer interpretable. And in order for readability reasons, of course, we have capabilities to transform that. In EHR4CR, we transform the blue model query, which is basically XML, into something called eclectic, which is more or less human readable. In the approach in Eureka is more to have the formalized query by itself be like a domain-specific language, so that the SNACL code you write is directly executable, but it is also readable to experts, meaning that you would type something like patient age greater than 15 and observation of, let's say, some SNOMED code and lab value of some long code at most X years before some other event. It's actually the approach there is to directly write the query as you would conceive it as a user and have it directly executed on the runtime.
Okay, yeah, got you.
In the middle, the data elements repository can be used in both contexts, but the nice thing is in the other approach is that it is much more flexible. To give you an example, you have seen in the copy screen here in the EHR4CR, the very simple model that we have for the template of observation, procedure, and substance administration, and as mentioned by David, in fact, on the side of the semantic resources, we have built more complex resources, but it's not easy to use them in the quite fixed context of the blue model and the eclectic, and so that's why we intend to go on with the collaboration of custodics, trying to make sure that our resources, version 2 resources, more complex, can be used with the technical framework of the Eureka project. Is it that, David?
Yeah, I think you did it quite nicely.
Okay, excellent. I saw in the list here that Frederick, you are online as a guest as well. Any questions from you if you had the opportunity to see the presentation here so far?
No questions in itself. So just the only thing that for the direction we're going with the protocol, which is also based on SDM, We could potentially have a placeholder for those formal expressions the way you do them in SDM as well, so that would be consistent with what's happening here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. We could take this in a couple of different directions. I know you have a couple of slides on the CRF part of this, which kind of follows on. What would people like to? Would you like to see that part as well, even though it's a little bit beyond our protocol, or do you want to stay on discussions or stay on talking more about the details here? Ron, any preference? Are you on mute, maybe, Ron?
Yeah, no, I'm here. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see the rest of the presentation.
Okay, let's go for that.
Okay.
Christelle, we are on page number 10 now, so direct me through the other ones.
Okay, we can go to 12, slide 12. So the use case 3 in EHR4CR is supporting the execution of the clinical trials, so and especially the data collection. So the idea is to extract clinical data that are stored in the electronic health record to automatically pre-populate forms, to pre-populate ECRF. So the idea was to get the formal representation of the different group items and items of the ECRF based on the ODM file. So and to make sure that we could derive the query specification so that we can extract the corresponding data in clinical data warehouse or electronic healthcare records. So from the semantic interoperability perspective, one important thing is to make sure that we could include in the CDISC ODM we could refer to the data elements that we store in the repository, so that we can derive the query specification corresponding to this data item to start the pre-population. So if you go slide 13. So it's basic information about the ODM structure. And so we just mentioned that in fact the idea is at the level of the ODM metadata to annotate this metadata using our data element definition. So what we are working on with xClinical is that in their CDISC ODM editor, they add an additional module for performing this semantic annotation, and to do this semantic annotation, they make use of the semantic services that we provide as part of the semantic interoperability platform. So if you go slide 14 is something that you know better than me. It's the hierarchical structure of the ECRF with this form def, item group def, item def, and for each item def their code list definition. And then if you go slide 16 to slide 7. So that's a copy screen of our data element repository, so in which you can find different template of observation procedure, substance administration in different domain area. slide.
So just a quick
yes.
add-on. So basically, what we have there on slide 16, the metadata repository, where the data elements defined that's what comes up on the query builder we had on the previous slide on the left hand.
Yes, exactly. It's the same hierarchy, symmetry.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. And then slide 17. It's just a copy screen of the different type of templates. So, for example, you have for the diagnosis, it's so in red you have the type of the template. So you can see when it is O, it is observation. When it is P, it is procedure. When it is SA, is substance administration. So, and what you can see here is that we have we define in the data element repository. We define the data element code corresponding to the item def, and then we formally define some value set attached to some of these data elements, and the value set corresponds to the code list definition in CDISC. So here, for example, you have the diagnosis. We can have different code referring to the different type of diagnosis. Could be primary diagnosis, secondary diagnosis, and we can define a value set. Here you can see that we are in the context of the final diagnosis at discharge, and we can define a value set. This one is very big because it is all ICD-10, and it means that and it's a hierarchical value set, and so you can provide the information about the item def and code list definition. If you go to something, we can also, and that's an issue for CDISC, because in our data model, when you have an observation, for example, the value of the observation could be a coded value, so you can provide a code list definition. But in case it is a physical quantity, in our model, we have the possibility of defining precisely the unit attached to the observation. And as a matter of fact, it's not obvious to address this issue in CDISC, to make sure to define precisely the unit for the different item def, or we have to work on that with XClinical. It seems to be not straightforward for them to import this information when they provide this semantic annotation process. So it's just, so the idea is that in the module that they are developing for each item definition, they have their own codes coming from the protocol in CDISC, and the idea is that they had some additional information, including the codes coming from the EHR4CR, just like they do when they use, for example, CDASH to annotate their ODM. So that's what we are working on with XClinical. So slide 18. So we work in with ODM 1.3.1, and the way we intend to perform this semantic annotation is exactly the same way they use to annotate their CDISC, their SDM, using SDTM or CDASH. So they will try to use a similar process. So slide 18. There are slides from Manuel. Probably you understand them better than me. So it's about ODM annotation using SDTM variables and the issue that they have on it. And for the slide 20, it's the way they annotate the ODM based on CDASH. So it is on this principle that they want to build the solution to annotate using the EHR4CR data element. So in slide 21, we are currently working on adapting the way they annotate their CDISC using SDTM CDASH so that they can annotate them using the EHR4CR data element. So slide 22, it's an example of creating some alias context for within an item def. So you can see the example where you can have two alias contexts, one in the context of the EHR4CR and another one in the context of CDASH. And I think that's it. Slide 23. So they in there, as I already mentioned, in their study composer, they have a tool to create CDISC ODM, and they are currently improving this tool to use the alias elements to annotate ODM item def with our data elements.
So basically what we've seen here is how we try, XClinical and the product try to squeeze in semantics into the ODM item structure. That's basically what you try to do here. Yep. Do you know if Manuel and the other ones from XClinical and the people in the product have been giving any thinking around if it would be RDF-based representation instead of ODM, what that would
it is very classical ODM. It will be very interesting to discuss with them. You have sent around some time ago specification of the CDISC standard in RDF. I think I'm not sure I have sent them to Manuel. It will be interesting to see how they consider this alternative. Perhaps it could support or ease the process, but I guess that going from one format to one implementation to another is quite challenging.
Yeah, I think what I've sent to you, or I know what I've sent to you, is it's RDF representation of the SDTM, the CDASH, and so on. So it's really expressing the structure of SDTM as such in RDF. It's not really an alternative to represent what ODM does. But I think that's what we're thinking of for the future here. So, okay. Thank you very much, Christelle and David, for the presentation. I would like to leave the floor open for the last 4 minutes here for questions. So a quick walk around the table. Ron, any follow-up, any more questions from you?
I guess one question, I have looked at some of the templates that you use in this project, and I'm wondering if there's any additional perhaps artifacts or documentation or anything that could be shared with us that could be helpful for understanding how the eligibility criteria are coded in your system. I guess using eclectic or actually the underlying representation itself.
I'm not sure to get the question. Your question is, could it be possible to access some example of eligibility criteria and the way they have been expressed using the query builder? That's it.
Yeah, basically, because all I've seen to date, I think I've seen a set of about 160 templates. They're kind of like at a very high level, I guess. So I'm not sure what else is available, but if you have something that you could share that would better understand.
What I can do is to, unfortunately, I can not show my thing. What we can do, I can distribute the link of the data element repository with some explanation. You can so that you could browse into the different data elements and to see what we have. We have the very simple one and generic one, like the diagnosis and the substance medication, which is just the list of ATC code. But we have defined some more precise observation. We have defined precise vital sign. We have defined, of course, number of lab test results. We have defined anatomic pathology observation and grade and scores. So we have some different. So the easy thing is to give you the link so that you can browse the metadata repository, and we are currently working on the deliverable where we give such information about the coverage and about the content and the description of the content of the metadata repository.
Yeah.
And nice. That would be great. And then if I have after I look, if I have questions, I'll reach out to you.
Okay, good, excellent.
Thank you.
Scott, and a final question from you?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, good. Frederick, anything from you?
No, nothing really, but maybe, so I know Philip quite well from X-Clinical, so maybe I'll get into a conversation when I see him again about, where they think they're going with the technology and if RDF is an option for them. So that might be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, definitely. That would be a good one to catch up on then. Sarah, any questions from you?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, all good. Thank you very much for a great presentation, Christelle and David. And we have each other's email addresses. And I will share the recording with the other ones. I can guess there will be more questions. I know Armando from FDA is really interested in all of this as well. So thank you very much and have a nice weekend.
Thank you for
organizing
this telco.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.